All right. Hi, everybody. We are really, really excited to be here this evening. We are, for the first time outside of our studio, we're in the campus of SUNY Purchase in Purchase, New York, and SUNY is State University of New York, where David Gideon, our guest this evening, is a teacher of acting. We'll get into the details of what that is, but SUNY, the SUNY Purchase acting program has for the past 3 years been distinguished by the Princeton Review as the best undergraduate acting program in the United States. So that says a lot for the program and the people that teach here. Currently, we are in David's classroom.
Yes, we are. Yep.
Yeah. So where all the magic happens. A little bit about our guest this evening. Our guest is David Gideon. David Gideon was a teacher at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute in New York for 15 years while Lee lived. And he served as the director of the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute for 3 years. And as far as we are aware, David is the only person that Lee taught how to teach. What that means is that Lee selected many people or a group of people to be teachers, but you said...
Well, I went over to him and I said I would love to teach, but you had to teach me how to teach. And when he said, why? You know my work. I threw a metaphor that he used back in his face, and I said, well, you tell us we don't have to be mechanics to drive a car. Something breaks down, we have to take it to the mechanic.
Right.
And now you want me to be a mechanic. He went, oh, okay. So then he became my tutor. So from 1976, when I started teaching for him, until he died in 82, he was my tutor.
Okay, we're going to circle back to that. But I typically like to, with the guests that we have on, sort of frame a context around the human being. So you're from New York, and you always wanted to be an actor, or how did fill us in on the years that briefly, just to give us some context of who you are and how you ended up in New York and how you ended up at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute and why, and then we'll get into sort of a little bit of what that was, and then we'll get into the meat of the interview, which is talking about the method and things related to.
Well, I grew up in New York. I'm a Greenwich Village kid, West 12th Street. The son of a lawyer. My father was a lawyer, and grew up thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, like my dad. And when I went off to college, in high school, I started doing theater, but it was not any kind of real dream of pursuing it or anything like that. Went to college, was a political science major for a week, and got involved in the theater on campus. We didn't have a theater department. We had two extraordinary theater people who were in the English department, Ed Brubaker and Hugh Evans, who were also in the summertime part of a fledgling organization on the West Coast called the Ashland, Oregon Shakespearean Festival.
So, I look behind me to look at my iPad to see if we have any activity. So every now and then I'll look over my shoulder. That's what's going on. I don't think anybody's sneaking up on me.
Okay. Not in here.
Yeah, not in here.
Anyway, they were extraordinary directors, and I started acting on the Franklin and Marshall campus where I went to college, undergraduate college, and got hooked. And because we didn't have a theater department and I couldn't be part of a theater major, I switched my major from political science to English and the humanities. I was very attracted to classical literature and wanted the humanities. And that's combined with stage experience, that was my hook. I was sold. That's what I wanted to do with my life.
Okay.
In college theater, sometimes when my imagination would become engaged, things started to become real, and that was actually a little bit scary at the time. And when I went to both Hugh and Ed about that, they said, oh, just kill that impulse and act up a storm. And that's pretty much what I did during the 4 years of college. But I read a lot, and what I read about was group theater, Stanislavski, Habima theater, Evgeny Vakhtangov, and it all started to make sense to me. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I love to read, and I read about the great teachers at that time, and so I read about certainly Harold Clurman and Stella Adler and Sandy Meisner, Bobby Lewis, and Lee Strasberg. And one of the things that really stuck out for me was that all the aforementioned people were students initially of Lee Strasberg, except for Harold Clurman. He was right there at the beginning of group theater.
And just to be clear, at the group theater, Lee Strasberg was charged with sort of the creative, being the, I don't know if creative director was right, but I mean, from my reading and what I recall, he was charged with that part of the group's endeavor.
Training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Implementing Stanislavski's exercises for group theater.
Okay.
And of course, he branched out. He always maintained that, yes, initially it was Stanislavski, but that he was much more impressed with Vakhtangov's work, and Vakhtangov having been Stanislavski's protege, that's really what intrigued Lee.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was making my choice as to where I wanted to study, I decided, number one, Lee was at the forefront of training all the other great teachers. Even though they branched off, they are all saying the same thing. When it comes to actually acting, what happens when we put a scene together? What are the elements that we're looking for in scenes? What are we trying to do when we're on stage as actors? All of that made, they're pretty much on the same page. Where Lee stood out for me, and still does, was the training of the actor's imagination. So whereas Sandy Meisner and Stella Adler are big proponents of, well, imagine that circumstance. The big question was how? How do I imagine it? What is imagination? How does that work? And that's where Lee made the greatest amount of sense to me. And so that's where I began to study. One of the things that always resonated with me was a dinner I had with Lee, in which I asked him, I said, Lee,
the fan.
Yeah, it's too much background noise.
Yeah, it is.
I said, Lee, Sandy, for example, says, imagine that. What's that about? How come not sense memory? And Lee said, of all the people that he had ever trained, Sandy had the most immediate and complete sense memory experience. Just thinking something, he would experience it.
So to Sandy Meisner, it would be counterproductive for a bunch of actors to be trying to work up their imaginations to sensorially create a reality or create an imaginary reality. I mean, I don't know the semantics of how to express that the most clearly. And so in view of his frustration, he created a technique that was more based on action, as an action to move a scene forward, meaning physical activity and listening and answering exercises.
I wouldn't.
The magic as if and.
Well, the magic as if, but even that's connected to sense memory.
Yeah.
As if that's my girlfriend, as if that's my boyfriend, as if I were just badly injured, as if I were coming out of this event. But to relate that to my own experience and let that activate my imagination. And that's where much of the confusion about Strasberg and Strasberg's work rests, at least in the greatest part of his work.
So you go to New York and you get into the Theater Institute. You interview, you audition.
You don't audition.
No,
interview. You interview. Yeah, he always felt that in the training of the actor, you shouldn't judge the talent. You train it. The actor brings the talent. The teacher trains it to whatever extent it's trainable. The actor's studio is a different environment. There, it's a series of auditions in which preliminary judges judge what's being presented on stage. And in the heyday, Lee had the final word at final auditions. Is that person going to become a member or not? That is a judging situation. As a matter of fact, those auditions are meant to be presented and still are on the level of an opening on Broadway. Not at the Strasberg Institute, not in Lee's classes before there was a Strasberg Institute. So Lee, who was teaching in a rehearsal room at Carnegie Hall prior to 1969, when the Strasberg Institute was founded, if you wanted to study with him, you went in, he interviewed you, you were accepted into class based on a whole bunch of questions that I still ask prospective students of mine in my private classes. Mm-hmm. And you went to study with him.
And without getting into the specifics of what those questions are, because I guess you don't want people preparing the answers to the questions before they go and meet with you.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Well, but what is the gist of the questions? What is it that you're trying to figure out about from a candidate coming in?
There's a broad spectrum of how they present themselves: vibrancy, intelligence, all the rest of it, sensitivity. But there are three questions that really are deal makers or breakers. And the first question is, what roles would you like to play? And so when somebody comes in and says, oh, I want to play comedies, or I want to play dramas, or I want to play tragedies, or I see myself as a leading man or a hero or a villain, that's an unprofessional answer and would almost automatically disqualify somebody. We're talking about people who can come in and say, I've always wanted to play Iago. If I knew that they were casting for that right now, I am there. I would beg, borrow, and steal to get up for that role. I've always wanted to play this role or that role or that role or this role. That's a person who's thinking about himself or herself very professionally. Mm-hmm. So that's a really important question. Another important question is to ask the person what they like to do outside of theater, not what they like to do for a living. What do you like to do? You have a completely free day. What do you like to do? What they like to do is unimportant. How the vibrancy with which they answer that question is what's important. So whether somebody says, I like to play chess or I like to skydive is not important. It's the life in the eyes, it's the life in the face, it's how that person comes alive when they talk about what they love. And Lee always said, don't let them finish answering. Just evaluate what you're getting and immediately interrupt and say, what do you hate? And you'd be surprised how many people who say they would love to be actors will go, well, hate's a powerful word. It's a pretty strong word. I don't know that I hate anything. Well, how are you going to be an actor? Don't you have passions? You love things, you hate things. Actors are passionate people.
Right.
And so those are really important questions, aside from getting an overview of each person as they come in.
So that was your process getting into the institute, the Theater Institute?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, so you were an actor, and you are an actor, a working actor.
Yeah.
And you studied in the classes with Lee. Mm-hmm. So at what point did he approach you to teach?
Wow, that's such a complicated story. I started studying at the Strasberg Institute in 1970, towards the end of 1970. In 1971, although I was not yet a member of the Actors Studio, I was in Lee's classes at the Institute. They did a Christmas show called The Mask of St. George and the Dragon, which was taken around to local hospitals and old age homes during Christmas. And I was invited to audition for that, and I got the part of King John in that. And so I got involved with closer to Lee and to Anna Strasberg, his wife, at that time. And it was right after that. It was 10 years after Marilyn Monroe's death. And Marilyn was a very close part of Lee's family. He said she was part of his family. And it was 10 years after she died, and she had left the greatest portion of her estate to Lee. And that was contested, and it took 10 years for it to come out of probate. When it did, and they found in Lee's favor, all of Marilyn's things, truckloads of Marilyn's possessions came out of storage and showed up at Lee's apartment on Central Park West. He rented a separate one-bedroom apartment that he just used as a storage unit and put everything in there, and then went, oh my God, what do we have here? And he said to me, I was a student of his at the time, I was tending bar to pay for my way in the world, and he said, how do you feel about spending time going through Marilyn Monroe's things and cataloging them for us? And so I did. His secretary at the time was a woman named Violet Arase. So Anna Strasberg, Violet Arase, and I started going through Marilyn's possessions and cataloging everything, including the very infamous or famous white piano that was Marilyn's. So I became very close to the Strasbergs during that time. I had a key to their apartment, so I could go in and out at will, and did for a number of years. And went out to California with them. I was at a critical point in my training where Lee and I both said, it's a shame if you take a 6-month hiatus now, why don't you come out and live in my house in L.A.? So I went out to their home, which was a rented home at that time. It was actually at 605 South Irving Boulevard in Los Angeles.
It's a memory.
Well, the house belonged to the Gettys, and they wound up, after Lee bought a home the following year or 2 years later, Getty donated that to the city. That's the official mayor's residence.
No way.
Yeah. I don't know that anybody lives there, but I know it is now the official mayor's residence in LA, but 605 South Irving Boulevard. And I came back into New York to do a small walk-on part in a film. I did not resume classes when Lee and Anna came back to New York that year. And I was working as a bartender, and then Lee said to me one night, how would you like to teach for me? And that's when we got into that whole thing about, if you'll teach me how to teach.
And what did that decision entail on your part? I mean, I could perceive that, wow, what an honor, right? But, I mean,
oh no,
it's a commitment as well. So what did that decision entail for you?
Well, at that time,
what sort of consideration did you have to give that?
The biggest consideration was, I think, my ego got in the way. Not in the sense of, I was going to be a teacher for Lee Strasberg. Quite the opposite. To me, I initially thought, well, okay, I'll teach. It's certainly more convenient than tending bar. And until my acting career gets going full steam, I will teach. And very quickly, I fell in love with teaching. And not only did I fall in love with teaching, I fell in love with learning more and more and more about this craft and this thing that we refer to as the actor's instrument and how it works. And as diligent as I had been in class as his student, as an actor, when he was tutoring me in teaching, so many things became fascinating to me. Lee had an unusual take on things, which is not just connected to sense memory and emotional commitments, but we were driving one summer. We were driving from Los Angeles to San Diego. And as we were driving, he said to me, and he was not a loquacious person out of the classroom. He didn't talk to people. He was known for his long silences out of the classroom. But he said to me in the car going down to San Diego, he said, "How many people do you think I've taught over the years?" And I, as many as stars in the sky. I don't know, Lee. And he was quiet again for a long time. And then he said something that really was fascinating and has fascinated me ever since. He said, "Never two the same." So it's not part of the acting teacher's responsibility is evaluating what's in front and saying, how do I teach that actor this craft? And it's different for each person. There's never two the same. There are teachers in existence today who say that they teach the method, whatever that means, and they'll say, create your own method. I teach you how to create your own method. And I'm not sure what they mean by that. I'm not really qualified to go into that, but I am qualified to tell you that that's exactly what Lee did. He understood how the instrument works. He tried to teach you how your instrument works and then said, get up and play it. Even connected to that, you may remember yourself, unlike most acting classes, those of us who came out of Strasberg's work learn that when a scene is presented in class, we don't, at the end of that scene, tell the actors what we saw. We don't exercise our abilities at that point as actors or directors. Instead, we ask the actors what they want to tell us about what they just did. What were you trying to achieve in today's effort? Not just in the scene, but as an actor, what did you try to do? What was your accomplishment? And I have to, at least initially, keep my comments to what the actor said he or she was trying to do. The actor says, it's the first scene I've ever presented in this class. I was as nervous as could be, and I just wanted to stay relaxed in a technical sense. I wanted to see if I could relax. My responsibility as a teacher at that point is to say, well, you accomplished that or you didn't. Here's where you accomplished it. Here's how. Here's where you failed. Here's how to correct that. Then perhaps I can go beyond, not in breaking an entire scene down, but in here's what your next step must be for your growth. So that really is a big separating factor for Lee. It's not a matter of what anybody likes or dislikes. It's a matter, I can't say, oh, I liked that when you did that, or I didn't like. That's subjective. Here's what you set out to do. Here's what I saw you accomplish. Or here's what you didn't accomplish. Here's why, and here's how to correct that.
You know what's also interesting, Wes, if you wouldn't mind, could you fix that the cable off the microphone and just loop it around? It's bugging me the way it's hanging down right there. Perfect. Thank you very much, Wes. You know, what's interesting also in that approach, I've known this intuitively, I guess, but listening to you say it so succinctly is that one of the lessons and ultimately one of the tools that you get from practicing the lesson is awareness. Because if I'm saying, I'll just use your example, I'm terribly nervous and I try to relax in a technical sense, right? And you tell me, well, you achieved it up to here and from here to here, but this is what you did and so on and so forth. Well, then I begin to develop an awareness of what a state of relaxation is and what a state of tension is and what tools I have at my disposal to correct.
Exactly.
And it really is about becoming aware. I mean, I've studied with you and I've read the books and all of that, but all of a sudden it really is striking home with me that is it. So it's sort of this thing that over the course of years in attrition, you keep building into your body, and at a certain point, that awareness is just part of who you are.
Sure, absolutely. I'm always amazed, both here at SUNY Purchase, where I teach some of Strasberg's work. We say that this program is a Stanislavski-based program, and not all the teachers on faculty. I'm the only Strasbergian on faculty.
Now,
here.
I don't want to distract what you're saying right now, and I don't want to go on a tangent, but I do want to use your comment right now to draw the distinction. So tell me what talk about the program and it being a Stanislavski program and you being the Strasbergian. Let's draw a distinction along the way.
Well, between Stanislavski's work and Strasberg's?
Yeah, and I understand that that's voluminous, but...
Oh, my gosh. I mean, we can write tomes about that, but, and have. But for the purposes of right now, when people say to me, as this program at Purchase does, when it says we are a Stanislavski-based program, that means that they're looking for a certain sense of an inner life for the character. Now, how that's achieved, there are many pathways.
What would be the...
Now, Strasberg, on the other hand, has a very specific pathway that we follow to achieve that inner life. But what most people don't understand is that pathway is a training device more than a utilitarian device.
We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that.
I hope so.
Yeah, we are. We're definitely going to get into that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get comfortable.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Okay. So...
But can I go back to one thing
Sure.
before you go to the so?
Yeah.
Because you did ask me what was it like when he asked me to teach, and all this.
Oh yeah.
All of this is sort of like surrounding that, and so it really was initially, yes, it felt like a great honor, but it also seemed like a great way out of standing behind a bar all night long, until my career.
Yeah.
Got underway. And then it became just a total, complete, all-encompassing fascination on this instrument.
Yeah, great. I mean, fantastic. I've worked with you, so I can appreciate. I've been able to appreciate in real time in practice what you're demonstrating.
And it's an instrument that no matter how good you get at playing it, you'll never completely master it.
Yeah.
And that's great.
That is great. I mean, when you speak to a violinist, they'll say the same thing about their violin.
Yes, absolutely.
And their bow arm and how they bow and their technique and their breathing and how the relaxation, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
They're very aware of their body's relaxation. Yeah. But no, I mean, I've made documentaries where I've interviewed lots and lots of classical music. Musicians, and so there is the parallel.
Yep.
So Stanislavski, as far as I know, and I'll summarize it, codified a series of events that occurred on any given night where a performer's work was good versus when it was not good. And I know that that's a word that's going to, the big red flag just went up because it's a judgment. And I'm just trying to basically summarize something and make a point. And that is that what Stanislavski did was codify. He had friends that were actors and directors and so on and so forth, and he'd go see plays, and he'd see one performance on one night that was fantastic, another performance another night was so-so, and another performance another night that wasn't so good. And he'd go and find out what was happening on the nights where it was great versus on the nights that it was not so great. And as a result, he began developing a technique. And that is the technique that is in all of the books that an actor prepares, building a character. And what's the third one?
Building a role.
Building a role. We have that information. Mm-hmm. It's there to read.
A very important additional component.
Yeah.
He lived at a time when medicine was making tremendous inroads in understanding the psychology of human behavior. So Pavlov's work figured very heavily into Stanislavski's work. Freud figured very heavily into his understandings of what was going on.
That's fascinating. I had overlooked that.
Yeah. So it's not just his great eye, but it's his great eye combined with his great mind in understanding what all these other scientists were saying and saying, how do these fit together?
Now, for some reason, that was happening in Europe, and in the United States, we were still at that time doing expositional theater. At least the majority of it was. And please correct me, because I'm not a scholar of any of this. I just, I'm going from memory of books that I've read. And I do remember that it was Lee Strasberg, Harold Clurman, and Stella Adler that attended the lab theater where Uspenskaya was teaching, and so was Boleslavsky.
Yes.
And they were visiting with the Moscow Art Theater.
1923.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, 1923, the work of Stanislavski and Nemirovich Donchenko, who was his partner at Moscow Art Theater.
Okay.
Had great success. They had great success with Chekhov's plays and other plays. And that's when they started a world tour. And they came to, one of their stops was New York, 1923. And Strasberg and Clurman and Cheryl Crawford.
That's right.
And Stella Adler all went to see this. And they were fascinated by it.
They wanted relevant theater.
They wanted relevant theater. But the big thing was that nobody seemed to be acting on the stage. People seemed to be living on the stage. No, we're sitting here, they're up there and behaving. And we're sitting here watching them behave. And the subject matter is larger than life, so are the actors. But only because of the situation, not because of posture or voice or anything like that. And they were completely mesmerized by it. When the Moscow Art Theater left New York, Uspenskaya and Boleslavsky remained behind and started to teach here. And that's when they all started to take those classes. And so that was their introduction to not only organic theater, but the avenues and the pathways into that inner life for the actor. But not all of it is inner life. I mean, one of the very important Strasberg exercises is the animal exercise that can lead towards character development. We do it for other reasons as well, purely training reasons as well. But that he got from Uspenskaya. And that's an external thing. There's nothing organic going on there. That's how do I move my body like the animal? How do I stand it up? How do I humanize it? What traits can I keep to help develop this character? Even if I can be a little bit anthropomorphic and figure out what the animal is thinking at that point, can I bring that to the development of a character as well?
On a personal note, I've discovered that the animal exercise in both of its iterations, the ones that you've mentioned, one is a teaching tool, the other one as a performance tool. I've discovered in my application of it as a performance tool that it's important for me to highlight that it's not necessarily that all of a sudden I'm going to start thinking the thoughts of a giraffe or of a frog.
Oh God,
or
no.
No, right.
No.
So it is that the process of engaging the imagination through that pathway in itself creates a behavior which is new and, if you've done your work correctly, germane to the behavior of the character for which that play or that belongs in that play.
Absolutely.
So it's a very valuable trigger for the imagination, and it's fun.
And it's fun. That's right. That's great
fun to do.
Well, think about it. You go on the internet, and you will see a piece of video that is put up of a child visiting an aquarium or a zoo.
Yeah.
And the child is looking at a glass wall, and on the other side are seals. And the child runs, and the seal follows it on the other side of the glass, and then runs in the other direction, it runs back. runs, and the seal follows, and they play this game together.
Yeah.
And the seal is intrigued, looking through its side of the glass at what this human is doing, this human child.
Right.
And then the child trips and falls. And the seal stops and looks through the glass until the child stands up and runs again. And we adults looking at it say, oh, look, the seal was concerned for the child. We give and impose on that seal human characteristics that it does not have.
We transfer it.
We transfer it. That's right. And as actors, why not?
Exactly.
Go ahead and do it. Have fun.
That's rhetorical. There is no why not. Just do it.
That's right. Just do it.
So these guys, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a history lesson on group theater or any of that.
Yeah.
What I am is trying to develop a context, and it's a context for why it is that this work was deemed to be important, and why it is that it continues to be important, and how it is that it's revolutionized, as far as I'm concerned, the acting that today is commonplace in any medium. I think that it's just influenced everything. And along the way, and we're going to get into this, also created a lot of there's been a lot of misinformation and things that have been misconstrued and things that have been misinterpreted. So that's all I'm trying to do by talking about the group theater and Uspensky and Boleslavsky.
Can I say something about something you just said, though?
Yes, absolutely.
Because really, at the heart of it all, when you say it's had such a great influence, yes, but not necessarily in a complete or healthy way. So that one of the things that has been overlooked is the distinction between natural behavior and real behavior on the stage or in film.
So let's clear that up. What is the distinction?
Well, natural behavior, in our definition of it, in Strasberg's definition of it, natural behavior is what people have learned to do, what people learned response. So in other words, if I go to a restaurant and I'm really, really hungry, I haven't eaten, I skipped lunch today and I'm at a restaurant, and the waiter brings a delicious platter of food to the next table, I have trained and learned to be able to say, oh, that looks wonderful, and it smells wonderful. Excuse me, waiter, what did you bring to the table? Can I have some of that? I'd like to place that same order and get some more of that same food. Mm-hmm. Okay. Whereas my real response is to reach over and grab the platter and consume it on the spot. And as the parent of a 6-year-old, we're still training that 6-year-old to be patient and not just grab food and shove it in his mouth.
Right.
So that's, to a large degree, the difference between natural and real. Watching a child who is perhaps overly coddled fall down and burst into tears, and you would think that child is terribly injured. And you say, oh my gosh, what happened? Nothing, I'm okay. Oh, the tears were so big. That's repetitive behavior, habitual response, and it's also natural. Whereas that child may not have that response every time he or she falls down. The real response can be something quite different. We see that in all areas of our lives. We're expected to respond in certain ways to life events. We're supposed to burst into tears and be filled with anguish at the news of the passing of someone close to us. And we're trained to do that, and that's natural response. Often when someone passes, our response is angry. Why did that person leave me? And that's valid also. One is neither more valid than the other. But the reason I go down that road with you is that we, from Stanislavski through Strasberg, we train people to achieve real response. And that takes a long time, and there's a lot of resistance to it because of habit.
I have to stop so that you can repeat that.
Okay.
We train people to achieve real response. So
Right.
the training is breaking habit.
That's correct.
In order to move into the scary unknown world of what's real.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And that part of the training is met with great resistance because the other is honest response, but not real. And real response is so much scarier than natural response. But where I was headed with this is people look at what well-trained actors do and they imitate it, which immediately moves it from real back to natural. And so even though the reality is achieved by group theater, actor studio, and many of Strasberg's students, leads to a broader recognition of what real behavior is, people imitate that in naturalistic ways. It's easier to do that than it is to learn how to be real.
For yourself.
For me?
No, I'm saying to be real for yourself.
Absolutely.
In the example you're saying, that people, it's harder for people to learn how to be real for themselves.
Absolutely.
Because we are highly unique, comprised of our own experiences and upbringings and intellect, intelligence, so on and so forth, right? So we all have our individual references.
Well, I'll give you an extreme example.
Okay.
I had a student this year here at Purchase who came from a really extremely difficult background. This student, I teach sophomores who are usually 19 and 20 years old. This student, at the age of 10, witnessed her mother come into a room and shoot her father dead, and then come after her and her brothers. They escaped, they lived, they survived. That is such an amazing trauma. I can't even begin to imagine what that would be like. Now she comes in to study with me, and I'm asking her to sit in a chair and relax and drop all the muscles and let whatever the muscles are containing come to the surface. And she doesn't want to do it. I have spent 10 years pushing that down. I don't want to do it. And I say, well, I'm not asking you to deal with that event. This is not therapy. I'm saying I want you to relax. I want you to be in control of your physical instrument. I want you to tell your muscles what you want them to do. Right now, that event is controlling your muscles, not you. Now, when you do that, when you control the muscles, some of the energy that they're containing may want to come out. You may find yourself crying for a while. But the instrument will become free of outside influence. That's when you are free to discover what your real response, not to that event, but to anything that you're imagining, anything that you're creating. That's when your instrument is free to do that, not before. Now, take that student who understands what I've just described to them and sit that student in a chair. They will be just as scared even after the explanation. Understandably, they should be. Those are huge and powerful events in her life. And so what you do as a teacher at that point is bring them along very slowly. Just touch on it. Sort of like getting into going swimming in an ice cold lake. Stick your toe in. Get in a little bit. See what that's like. Or the example I like to use very often is like walking onto a frozen pond. Nobody in their right mind would run out there. So walk a little bit. See if the ice will hold you. Mm-hmm. If it does, say, hey, that was fun. Mm-hmm. Go a little further out. Maybe the ice will settle a little bit. You'll hear it crack a little bit. Is that going to break through? No? Okay, good. I'm safe. Good. And there's no rush. There's no time frame.
So, relaxation. Let's get into it.
Okay.
What is relaxation? Well, we've alluded to it a couple of times. So, in the context of Strasberg's work, what is relaxation?
The appropriate amount of energy in your muscles to get any job done. I'm sitting here right now, and I am relaxed. I'm uncomfortable. The chair is an uncomfortable chair. I'm sitting in an uncomfortable position.
We can change that for you if you'd like.
No, trust. I've been in every one of these chairs, and none of them work. Not when you're sitting for a long time. But you're sitting, so I'm uncomfortable, but I'm relaxed within it. In other words, I'm not holding energy anywhere in the muscles that are where it's not necessary.
Right.
And that's the definition of relaxation. Any unnecessary energy in the muscles, excess energy, is a form of tension. Even sometimes people have, in an effort to relax, and you've seen it on stage in performances, you've seen it in classrooms, where people say, I'm going to stay relaxed. And they're not relaxed, they're dead. That's another form of tension.
Negative tension.
Negative tension, that's right.
Because it's not the exact amount of energy.
Not enough energy to get the job done.
Right.
Too much energy to get the job done.
So I'm going to complicate things.
Say again?
I'm going to complicate
Go
things.
ahead, go for it.
So you've given a practical example of sitting in a chair, and it's an uncomfortable chair, and you're not letting that get in the way of what you stated. Let's throw in circumstance. I don't want to use you sitting in a chair as an example to keep building on, but let's use your natural versus real example. You're sitting in a restaurant, you're famished, you're very hungry, a waiter brings a plate of food. Your real response is to reach out, grab it, and consume that food immediately, but you don't. Mm-hmm. In this case, the character doesn't. You're adding a layer of tension in order to keep you from acting out on your impulse.
By choice. Not by habit.
And that's a distinction. And
so, in a scenic situation, I not only have the circumstance that I'm creating, not only must I be paying attention to what you're doing and the energy that you're sending in my direction, I have an objective that I am pursuing in a scene. Well, if I only follow my impulses, I may destroy any chance that I have of being successful with my objective. And so I say, oh my God, I want to reach out and I want to strike that actor.
Yeah.
But if I strike that actor,
you won't get your loan or whatever. Right. I don't know. I'm making stuff up.
That's right. I won't get what I want.
Yeah.
And so I have to hold that impulse in. Is that then tension? No, it's necessary energy.
Because the task at hand is to
That's right.
achieve the objective. And if you strike out, you might not.
That's right. So yes, you're correct in what you say, but there's another component. You say something to me, or you behave in a way towards me on stage in performance, and I find myself crossing my arms across my chest. That's my response to you. Now, is that an honest response? Is it a real response? Or is it a natural response? Is it tense? Or is it just honest response?
Well, it depends on what you got cooking.
It depends on what I've got cooking. It also depends. There's one way I can find out. I don't have to sit there and analyze it. There's one way I can find out. Relax it. Open that instrument up. the awareness that you were referring to earlier, from constantly working on your instrument, constantly working on your craft. I'm aware that I'm doing that. I'm not watching myself do it. I'm just aware of it. So I'm aware that I'm going to open that instrument. Ooh, that was a mistake. I better close that again, or I'm going to really screw this up.
Right.
Not tension. Or, oh, look at what this response is. Oh, I like this. That was tension. Now I'm relaxed.
Doesn't what you're talking about, though, feed into the story that's out there about how method actors are always in their own worlds and introspective, and they're not a part of what's actually happening, but they're more looking in than acting out?
That actually, in my experience, is in response to a different aspect of method or Strasberg's work.
Sure.
And that is the aspect of constantly doing sense memory work, which forces you inside, Stanislavski had a great expression for it when someone is actually creating something and not quite responding to it because they're so inside what they're creating. And he called it psychologistic behavior. And so you'll see someone sitting in a chair and they're obviously doing something perhaps creative, and as they're doing that, are we okay there?
Yeah, Wes, could you plug me in? The laptop, please. Yeah, it's unplugged somewhere. Yeah.
So that that rather than responding outward and allowing myself to respond to that, oh my God, what a beautiful day. Oh my God, the sun and the breeze and the blue sky, and it just feels so great to be outside, is all coming out. It's my inner life experience, but I'm sharing it outwardly. There's a tendency, especially early in training, for people to go, oh, I can feel the sun on my skin, and I can feel the breeze, and I can smell the springtime grass, and they go inside, and that is a terrible thing for an actor. And it leads towards what Stanislavski referred to as psychologistic behavior. So yeah, I agree. I think people do that a lot, and it's a mistake. But it's not in the teaching; it's in the interpretation, and it's usually interpreted that way by people who are relatively new to the training.
So, what is the correct interpretation
of?
Let me be clear. Because we're talking about two different things. One is the reference that I made toward being aware of your instrument and being aware of yourself in circumstances, which implies that you're not in the moment because you're inside.
Well, wait a second. When I'm driving a car,
yeah, I
am aware of how the car is behaving. I'm aware whether it's responsive to me stepping on the accelerator. I'm aware of what if I step on the brake. I'm aware of how tight the steering mechanism is. Is it being responsive? Is it oversteering or understeering? I'm aware of that. If I'm driving in weather conditions, I'm aware of how the car is operating. If it's a snowy day or a rainy day, am I starting to hydroplane or am I skidding in the snow? What do? I have to be aware of that. I can't just blindly say, hey, I'm driving. Is that's normal behavior. When someone is new to driving.
That's why I'm smiling.
When someone's new to driving, they have to pay particular attention. I have a 17-year-old son who's a new driver. And this past winter, he would say, well, hey, Dad, it's snowing outside. Come drive with me. Let me drive, but teach me. And he would watch the intensity of him paying attention to what the car was doing in the snow. Well, there'll come a time, hopefully, with enough practice, where he's aware of that without having to pay that kind of attention. And the same exact thing applies to us. We can't rush it. You can't say to somebody, I'm going to train you in this 1 year or in these 2 years or whatever. I studied with Lee for 11 years, and it wasn't enough. Simple as that.
Oh, pretty complicated instruments,
Yeah.
human beings. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
to get inside and start digging around and try and figure out who am I and what am I and
And then who's my character?
Yeah. So then let's talk.
So wait a second, just to wrap that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to work with awareness, but I can't work with watchfulness. I have to work with awareness.
And awareness is something that you develop over time.
Yep.
Okay.
And practice.
Yep. So it's over the course of, so you get out what you put in. If you concentrate, if you do the exercises, if you do the relaxation exercises, if you are vigilant about these things, or maybe vigilant isn't the right word, but then it becomes part of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just by doing the exercises. I tell my students, yes, when we're sitting in chairs, let's just stay with relaxation, not sense memory.
Okay.
Here's our approach to relaxing. And our approach to relaxing is an approach that is for the theater. It's not for anything else.
It's not, so relax.
Yeah. Hey, I tell people I do a lot of different things to relax.
Right.
Playing with my kids is very relaxing to me.
Yeah.
Flying airplanes is very relaxing to me. Jumping out of airplanes is very relaxing to me. Scuba diving is very relaxing to me. Exercising is very relaxing to me. Yeah. Can't do any of that during a performance unless it's a character given.
Right.
But I can and must technically relax, not only in preparation for performance, but during performance. Because the very playing of the instrument puts it out of tune. So I have to be constantly tuning it as I'm playing it. I have to build that kind of awareness, not watchfulness, awareness to do that. Now, if I reserve that strictly for the half an hour, if I'm diligent, 40 minutes, if I'm really dedicated, a day of sitting in a chair and relaxing, it's not enough. Because I've got the other 23 hours and 20 minutes of not doing it. It's a disproportionate amount of time. So how do I do that? Well, relaxation isn't just sitting in a chair going through the maneuvers of finding the muscles or using them. It's a matter of being aware of how much energy I have when I pick up this glass, how much energy I'm using when I'm going to take a sip from it, and so forth. So I have to do that and train myself to do that throughout the day. Now, where does that lead most young actors? Sometimes to an open state where they're saying things and doing things that are just totally antisocial, but I'm an actor.
Right.
No, that's not what we're telling you. Please, no. You keep that up, the phone stops ringing. No, right. You can't do that.
Right.
But you have to be aware of what you're doing. That's all.
So, I don't know. I have a bottleneck of things to talk about right now.
Okay.
And one direction that we could head in is linearly. Keep talking about your experience in learning how to teach and in teaching. Another way that we can proceed is to begin to define these things so that we understand what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the best way to go. Now,
okay.
Because we're already talking about it anyway.
Okay.
So we've talked about what relaxation is, and there is a technique that was developed by Lee, correct?
Yes, mostly.
And this offers an opportunity to address another aspect of the method that I think has been misrepresented, which is that method actors are mumblers and have low vocal quality, because part of the relaxation exercise is precisely vocal. And it's in connecting the energy of the body with the voice.
Absolutely. Both vocally and in movement.
Right.
Yeah.
So why is there that? Is it because of the Brando became the standard bearer for method, and he had a reputation of being a mumbler compared to his contemporaries? Because, I understood everything Brando says, so I don't know.
Yeah, he's clear-spoken. I think it's a whole other issue.
What is it?
And I've never...
But you understand we're talking about two things.
Yeah.
Okay, Great.
But first of all, while you bring up Brando, let's be precise and clear. that Brando was not a student of Lee Strasberg's. He did work with Lee at the Actors Studio for a while. But Brando was a student of Stella Adler's and to some degree of Ilya Kazan's when Ilya was his director. And Gage's style of direction was one that was as instructional as it was directorial.
Okay.
So let's understand where Brando fits in there.
Okay.
But I really do think it's the demands of cinema. We're used to, in prior to group theater, prior to Moscow Art Theater, we're used to stentorian sounds from actors, over pronunciation, projection, so on and so forth. Now we get to film, and if we do that, and we use that kind of a voice, there's a person sitting on the side going like that, going.
Right.
Right. And so we learn in film that we can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so that may start with that kind of behavior out of people like James Dean, like out of Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, people like that. But then it's taken to a whole new level by Mickey Rourke, back at the time when Mickey was really doing stuff. And so people think they can, that's it, you see, and those become iconic actors, and I want to be like that. Meanwhile, Strasberg is telling all of us to sit in chairs and go, in a full, even vibrating sound that comes from the chest. And if we couldn't do it or didn't do it, he would say, well, your imagination is active and wonderful, you're responding and you're being expressive, but you must work on your voice. You got to be in the theater. Now we're in the theater, and I can't remember the last time I went to a Broadway show where it wasn't mic'd.
That's true. I can't either. And I just saw a small production in Los Angeles, and everybody was mic'd.
Everybody's mic'd. Sad. Not only is it sad because of vocal production, it's sad because of what that does to the actor's instrument. Because unless the actor makes the commitment, to have that open sound, things are held under a sort of a cloth, like a cheesecloth.
Yeah.
It's in here. Or immediately opens the instrument. So unless people begin to do that, they're robbing themselves of the full potential of their own experience and their own expression.
That's very true.
Yep.
So, okay. So we talked about
which takes us back to naturalistic behavior. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
We talked about why there's a potential, why there is a misrepresentation of method and mumblers, right? But then now, what is the relaxation exercise intended to do?
Get the actor in control of his or her instrument.
Yeah.
Mostly that. Will my instrument follow my own commands? It also tunes the instrument in the sense of, is my instrument receiving and openly and expressing openly, not behind physical tension. So it's both of that. Strasberg had this great funny thing he would say, that when we're watching an actor do nothing more than sit in a chair and relax, we're already watching an actor at work. No lines to remember, no character to create, no situation to make real, no objective to pursue, no blocking to follow. None of the above. Can an actor simply sit in a chair and get the instrument to do what is asked of it? Go completely limp as a beginning, not as an end, as a beginning. Can you get your instrument to do that? We fight habit when we do that. We fight our own personal histories of containment when we do that. We fight our concerns and our self-consciousness when we do that. A zillion things come into play. When an actor couldn't do that consistently, Lee would say, look at you. You couldn't even play a corpse.
A bad day for that actor.
Bad day for that actor. Or a good day if it made sense to
right.
if it made sense, it was
But
a
I'm
good
putting
day.
myself in those shoes. Like, oh my God, Lee Strasberg told me I couldn't even play a dead person. What am I doing?
Oh my God, that's right.
Okay, so the next step, and I'm going just from
That's all right.
the training. I'm not saying there's an
Man.
order like belts in a karate dojo where it's like a next step you're going to get the brown belt or whatever.
Well, actually, there are steps.
But they're not sequential. They're on an as needed basis. I mean, hold on a second. The first step obviously is learning how the relaxation works. Second step is introducing sensory work.
Right.
So those are two defined steps. But when we get into later work, that's on a case by case. Like I don't want to jump ahead because I want the whole subject of emotional preparation and sensory work and effective memory versus effective memories. I mean, that is the 400-pound gorilla in the room when we're talking about the method or the Strasberg's method.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to jump over that, but there is an order that you take your students, but then after a certain place, you introduce private moments in order to do certain things. So some are teaching tools and some are...
Well, it depends on when you do them and for what reason. And that's what most people... a student of mine recently went down to the Strasberg Institute and applied for a teaching position there. I've been studying with David Gideon for a great number of years. I think I know enough to at least teach a beginning class, and I want to apply for a job here. I'd like to be considered for a job here. And they had that person observe classes there, and then they, in parting, gave that student the list of exercises in their sequence.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Not only no, they even had written out in that all of the early exercises are to be done with the eyes closed.
No. No.
No. Not unless you want to spend a career doing butterflies are free. I mean, no.
Butterflies are free. You're playing a blind guy.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. No. Now, if a person is able to smell and taste and hear and touch an object, these glasses.
It's okay, but this is where I don't want to jump over stuff. So go ahead.
Yeah. But every time I look, I can't see anything except my empty hands, and it so frustrates me that I lose the smell and the taste and the touch and whatever else, the weight and the balance of it, that I can't work. We'll say to that person, okay, work with your eyes closed for a while.
Right.
Just till you're over that difficulty. But we don't say work with your eyes closed. But even that, there was an actress from Australia 2 summers ago who called me from Australia. I'm going to be in New York and I want to come study with you. Great. Call me when you get here. Calls me when she gets here, comes up. I interview her for class. Delightful. Love to have her in class. I'm only going to be here for a month. So, well, I'll tell you what. I'm not going to take you on as a student for a month. I will only confuse you in 1 month.
Yeah.
There's no way I mean, no. No quick fixes. No, you may not study with me. But you're all the way here from Australia. As long as you're in New York, you can come to my class as often as you would like and observe. I don't even charge for that. This isn't a matter of trying to sell tickets to my class. Right. I had enough faith in her sensibilities, her non-judgmental sensibilities to say, yeah, come watch class as often as you want. But I can't teach you and I can't put you on stage. I'd be taking your money under false pretenses. Okay. I don't hear from her for about 2 weeks. She comes up, takes me up on my offer. She's watching a class. She says, oh, I'm studying with, and she mentioned somebody else. And I said, how's that going? And she says, well, I survived my first exercise. Survive? Why should you have to survive an exercise? This is acting. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
if you have to survive it, something's really wrong. What was your first exercise? A private moment. A private moment? Yes. How'd that go for you? Well, I couldn't do it until that teacher really pushed me through it.
Oh, my God.
And I'm sitting here going, and I said it to her. I mean, normally I keep stuff to myself, but I said, no. First of all, private moments, you don't even have the skill set yet to address how to go about it. But number two, we don't challenge ourselves to do private moments. There's a whole skill set in which we create an environment that allows us to do a private moment. And when we first assign that to a student, it's not like the normal sequence of exercises. Maybe I'm doing several weeks of overall sensations, several weeks of personal objects, several weeks of this and this kind of combination of that. Sometimes people work on private moments for months till they even get it the first time, till they're able to do it.
Yeah.
Fine. Take your time. There's no rush.
Able to do what?
Huh?
Able to do what? I mean, I know
Actually,
private moment, but what is the definition?
Well, a private moment is a behavior. It's something that you do actively, or the manner in which you do something that you would stop doing if somebody approached if you even heard somebody approaching the room, you would stop. Even if you knew that that was the person closest to you in the entire world, no, you would stop. If that person came into the room and said, "What were you doing?" You go, "Oh, nothing." That's a private moment, not a moment of privacy.
What's the difference
between a moment of privacy and a private moment?
Yeah.
Well, a private moment is what I just described. In moments of privacy, we often exhibit behaviors that we can be even moderately embarrassed by. We get caught up in our own world. We get caught thoughts. We find ourselves doing things, and someone goes, "Oh, you're picking your nose." "Oh, was I? Oh, gosh, I'm sorry." "You're scratching your butt." "Oh, gosh."
And from a teaching perspective, what's the difference? In the context of teaching, why would you teach a private moment? When would you teach a private moment? And why would you teach a moment of privacy? And when would
Well, I don't teach moments of privacy.
Okay.
Moments of privacy come as a matter of course, literally out of the gate. When someone is properly focused and relaxed, we get moments of privacy constantly.
That's important.
People are following their impulses unself-consciously and freely. Those are moments of privacy.
So then yes.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Private moments have two different benefits. One is a training benefit. Sometimes we'll get someone who just cannot give up their awareness of doing it for the audience. And the private moment is one of two exercises that are strictly Strasbergian exercises. The private moment he actually invented, based on Stanislavski's expression that, to a large degree, acting is the ability to be private in public. So he sat down and addressed a problem that some actors were having and came up with the private moment exercise. So it really was to address an actor's problem in terms of always being audience aware or camera aware. Very quickly, it became evident that they have tremendous applications in acting. Whether they're your own private moment that you're bringing to a performance. I once had a young actress playing Millie in Picnic, and there's that wonderful scene that how do you talk to boys is the catch line in that scene between Millie and Madge. And the scene starts with Millie being alone on stage, and her first line is she's hearing the band practice for the picnic in the distance, the two over a fence, and they stop, and she goes, "Oh no, don't stop, don't stop playing." And how do you say that line? Where does that line come from? But this actress said to me, in the response to what he wanted to tell me after the scene, said, you know how sometimes when you're getting ready for a date, you make believe you're on the date. Sometimes you hold somebody, sometimes you kiss somebody, sometimes you dance with somebody, you do all of that. And I said, yeah. She goes, well, that's what I was doing. I was doing that private moment of being alone with an imaginary first date, but the music was playing. So when the music stopped playing, it wasn't just that the music stopped playing, they burst my bubble of privacy. It was like, no, don't stop. So it really enhanced the scene wonderfully, and that was her private moment. Other times, there are character private moments. The character does something that is just so outrageous. Sometimes an actor might improvise and do something that is not written into the script and is not a private moment of their own, but somehow is within character, a character's private moment that evolves. Bob De Niro famously in Taxi Driver. You talking to me?
Yeah.
So that you have all these different reasons and applications for them in acting, but it was originally a training device.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get to the meat and potatoes here with emotional memory and sense memory and affective memory and the whole argument there. What is it? What's it? Why is it? Is it? Let's do it this way. Let me organize my thoughts here. As a teaching tool, what does it accomplish? A. B. Why do you teach it? And C. What's the brouhaha? I mean, I know from the books and stuff and from knowing you, but...
Well, the first thing to keep in mind is that a very important part of Strasberg's teaching is that we cannot work for emotion.
Can you repeat that?
We cannot work for emotion. And going back again to that separation between what's real and what's natural, in our real lives, we do not try to be emotional. When news comes to us, wonderful news comes to us, terrible news comes to us, we respond. His teaching was to bring that same reality to the stage, to acting. Do not work for emotion, work for the reality that surrounds behavior, that surrounds our lives, and be relaxed enough to be able to respond to that. Will your responses be emotional? Maybe. Maybe. Maybe not. But they will be real. So you create that reality. So there are conditioning exercises that are, because we're responsive and sensitive instruments, actors, human beings, we respond to our environments, we respond to our memories, we respond to each other, we respond to people. And so if I create somebody, I'm going to respond to them as if they're there. When I say create somebody, if I can actually see and touch and smell and hear a person, not what they're saying, not an event, let's put that for later. But if I can see them, I am going to respond. Earlier tonight, I have not seen you at least a year.
At least.
Maybe longer. And so when I was at the restaurant and you called, you were delayed, you had to stop, so you got stuck in traffic and so forth, okay, fine. When you walked in and you put your hand on my shoulder and I turn around and I see you, I don't have to think about how to respond. I look at you and my heart swells.
It still hurts the way you hit me.
Yeah. My heart, no, I just, that we have a history together. We're close.
Yeah.
And I don't have to think about that. I see you. When forget the wonderful world of Skype. when we call on the phone and I hear your voice, I feel good. That's normal and natural. Look at my children when you call, when you and I are on Skype sometimes. And one of my children will go, oh, it's Andreas. Oh, they don't try to do that. That's their response to you.
Yeah.
We don't need to try to do that. We respond to our environments. It's too hot, it affects our mood. It's too cold, it affects our mood. It's rainy, it affects our mood. It's snowy, it's breezy, it's anything, it affects our mood. We're sleep deprived, we've gotten too much sleep. I have a cold, I have a flu, I've had too much coffee, I've had too much to drink. All those things go beyond just their physical conditions. We have subjective response to those things. So they affect our moods. I don't have to work for that. That comes along. And part of our discovery, never two the same, is for you to discover what's on your artist's palette. When you are out on a strong, hot, bright, sunny day, what's your response to that? Not what's the person sitting next to you. What's your response? So that you know if you need a particular response, you know what to create for the scene. That's as a preparation, not as a response during the scene. If you say that to me and I want to be angry there, and so I'm going to create that and I'm going to be angry, that's not acting. That's manipulating. I just want to create the situation, prior circumstance, all of that, so that I'm conditioned to respond to what you're giving me, so we can act together.
And also something that's assumed in what you're saying is that you've done this you've practiced it long enough that it's no longer, you're no longer at the beginning of becoming acquainted with how it is you respond to certain things.
That's right.
You've done this enough that you just think that, and there it is.
That's right. Lee had an interesting description for it. He said, when you have a child and you want to teach that child how to play catch, you don't throw a ball at the child. That child is going to get hurt. You say, put your hands together like this, and you toss it into their hands countless numbers of times. Even before that, you just roll it on the ground to them. They roll it back to you. Countless numbers of times. You do this over and over again. You teach that child how to throw a ball. You teach the kid how to catch. And you do this over and over and over again. There will be a day when you can actually take something and throw it unexpectedly and say, think fast, and that person's hand will come up and catch it without the conscious mind engaging. Oh, I better catch it. But that happens after countless repetitions of let's play catch. And it's the same thing with sense memory. Countless repetitions and repetitions, so that most of the time, all I have to do is think and get my to response, because my thought is automatically connected to the sense memory. And that takes us back to Sandy Meisner.
Isn't that interesting? It certainly does.
Because Sandy was that way as a gift from heaven. Sandy Meisner, according to Lee Strasberg, if you said to Sandy, imagine that you're out in the rain. You could see every single drop of rain hit him. You could see it accumulate and roll down his back and get caught behind his ears and down his neck. You could see it. If you said to him, stop and explore that, it would frustrate him because he was already there. So that when we do sense memories slowly and carefully the first times and build facility with it and get faster and faster and faster, our goal is to become Sandy Meisner.
Got it.
But never emotion. Emotion takes care of itself. Even when we're doing exercises that are definitely emotionally connected. Personal objects. I know that this personal object puts me in a sad mood, an angry mood, a happy mood, a whatever mood. Therefore, I don't have to worry about that. I just have to have the object ready. Not so that I can respond appropriately to what you're telling me or doing. as a preparation for my instrument coming into the scene, to be in the right frame of mind. According to Strasberg, if I'm coming in and it's Act 1, Scene 1, and I'm in a great mood today, and my character's supposed to be in a great mood, take it onto stage with you. But if I'm in a terrible mood, and I come into the theater and I have my character's in a good mood, I have to condition my instrument to be in my character's mood. That's
technique.
It's technique and it's craft. It's not in response to what you're telling me or doing me. It's so I can respond in character to what you're saying.
You have to tune your instrument. You have to know how to tune your instrument for the particular performance.
Exactly. Now, interestingly, let's take that to the ultimate end. Let's talk about the most talked about and the least used of all of his training, the affective memory.
Yeah.
Now, very important.
I remember I used to think of that as sort of like the holy grail.
Yeah,
you know, it's like one of these days I'm going to get to do an effective memory finally.
Well, if you needed it.
I understand. I don't think I ever did.
Well, you know, there are students. I had a wonderful student named Kelly Curtis years ago. Wonderful actress. Ultimately became a member of the studio.
No, but I actually remember thinking, if I don't get to do the effective memory, I don't graduate.
I know, right? Yeah, I know. But a lot of people think that.
That's
exactly.
weird.
Exactly. I know. Why?
I don't know.
Kelly was one of those people, you would say to her, Kelly, I want excitement from you as if, there really is a Santa Claus and he just came down your chimney, right? And boom, she was there. Whoa. I mean, it was just like a kid, with the greatest excitement in the world. How did she do that? It's who she was.
Right.
I want the greatest amount of fear imaginable. Whoa, she was there. Why teach that person an effective memory? She's already doing it.
Okay.
You follow?
I do.
Okay. Now, let's understand a couple of things. One, it's affective memory, not effective memory.
Okay.
All right. It's the memory of effect, not of effect.
Okay.
All right.
Could you distinguish? Could you tell me what the difference
Sure.
is?
I'm not doing it for an effect on stage or in acting. I'm doing the affective memory so that it affects me and I can respond to it.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Now, it is the one exercise that without question is disruptive to acting. It requires so much that it can interfere with an actor's ability to function in the moment on stage or on screen, which is why it's rarely even necessary. But when it is, we're willing to do that. So let's take a scene like the final scene in Lillian Hellman's A Children's Hour.
Set it up, because I'm sure people that are going to be watching this don't know what that is.
Two young women who are co-owners of a girls' school together. They're lifelong friends. They went to college together. They've trained together. Now they're in business together. And one of the girls who's attending the school charges them with inappropriate behavior with each other, that they have some kind of a same-sex lesbian relationship. And in the scandalous nature of that in that time frame, it practically destroys their lives. The school closes. One of the two women is engaged to be married, and the fiancé breaks it off because he can't live with the scandal. In the very final scene of the play, they're sitting there together, the two women, and one of them says, "But I think I do love you the way in which they say I do." And the other one denies it. No. And in the very final moment of the play, the one who declares her love leaves, and we hear the gunshot off stage when she takes her life. unless that actor has a full emotional response on stage to the denial of self, that offstage gunshot is meaningless to us. I can't be upset. I have to be devastated. That requires an effective memory. And because it is so critical and so important, we're willing even to almost not be engaged in order to achieve it. But how many moments like that exist even in great theater? You take a play like A Man for All Seasons, Robert Bolt's masterpiece play, A Man for All Seasons. There's not a moment like that in the play. There are very passionate moments, there are very emotional moments, but they don't demand that type of fullness.
Yeah.
Okay, now, here's where it gets interesting. If I, oh boy, this is so clear to me. How do I clearly communicate it?
Well, I mean, if it's not clear, I'll let you know.
Okay, here you go. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. And this goes back to real and natural again. An effective memory is the total recreation of a traumatic event. Now, trauma is huge. It can be wonderfully traumatic, it can be horribly traumatic, but it's huge. When I go to recreate that event, and that is a combination of many exercises at the same time. What I'm wearing, what the environment is, what else is around me, what's taking place, are there other people there? Are there animals nearby? What's going on? Not the event itself, just all of that needs to be created. Then I have to move through time to the moment of the event and let the event take place. And when it does take place and I respond to it, if I respond to it, I have to almost freeze time so that I don't move to the other side of the event. I don't move past the event. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, does that mean that I'm going to respond to it today the same way I did when the event took place? Only if I feel the same way about it today as I did when it took place. How do I find out about that? By recreating it. So, it's possible that I've changed. Lee used to say, you break up with a lover and your heart is broken. And you see them 6 months later and you feel that little pounding in your chest. You're still feeling something for that person. You bump into them a year later, nothing. You bump into them 2 years later and you don't know what you saw in them in the first place.
Yeah.
So obviously if you create that person, you're not going to be in love with them again or heartbroken again. Same thing with an effective memory. So I have to create what I think is going to lead to the emotional memory and find out whether it does or not. I can't work on an emotional memory. I can work on an effective memory that might cause an emotional memory.
That might cause an emotional response.
Yes. Emotional response, emotional memory, same thing.
So it's the only one of the... Is it a teaching tool or performance tool?
Performance tool. You don't teach that.
You don't teach effective memories.
You don't. Of course, you teach people how to do them.
But it's not you teach them. You teach them for performance. But it's the only one that, without a doubt, is disruptive to acting.
Yes, that's right. Can be disruptive.
Can
for
be
acting.
disruptive.
And also, it's the only one by itself that is not either a diagnostic or corrective exercise. I'm not going to ask anybody to do an effective memory unless I am 100% confident in their ability to turn it on, turn it off, respond to it, enjoy it. And that's a training When people have gone outside of those parameters, it can sometimes be horribly disastrous. I've had people, when I was still at the Strasberg Institute, there was a young woman who came to me, she was one of my students, and said, I think I am being held back in my expressive self because of an incident in my youth that I've never really dealt with, and I'd like to deal with it through an effective memory and get it out in the open and be done with it so that it doesn't cloud the rest of my work.
What's the psychological term for that? It's a Freudian thing. Anyway. It's a tangent. Please go ahead.
But it doesn't. I want to hear what.
Please, I'll think of it. Keep going.
But I said to her, no, this isn't therapy. What we're doing here is not therapy. So when all of those issues are resolved, we can perhaps go to it. But we don't go to it to resolve the issues. Well, she went to another teacher and made the same proposition, and that teacher said, sure, let's try it and see what it is. Well, the person created it very effectively, and it worked. And I'm home at night, and it's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I get a phone call with a sobbing actor on the other end of the line. I can't stop this. How do I stop this? And there are techniques that we have for stopping it too. So I have to talk a person down. But they never should have been there to begin with. They weren't ready for it. This isn't a therapy. Now, in terms of what you were saying, what I said, what you picked up on.
Gestalt.
A gestalt, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
Now, something that I said that you picked up on is that it can take an actor out of the moment. It's so intense to create it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, that's only true for a short period of time. Because we build to all of our exercises, not necessarily only in training, but in usage, we build Pavlovian response. So, for example, Lee Strasberg used an effective memory in a terrible movie called The Cassandra Crossing.
I like that movie.
Huh?
I like that movie.
Did you?
Yeah. But anyway, go ahead.
Fun movie. I mean, it's fun, but
okay.
OJ.
All right.
OJ. And who else is Sophia Loren and a big star cast. But there's a moment where he's on this train and he has this big emotional moment as if they're taking this Holocaust survivor back to the camps on the train, and he has a complete breakdown. When he came back, they filmed that at Cinecittà in Rome, and when he came back from making that movie, he says, he shared with us in class, he said, yeah, that was interesting because like all of you have complained to me over the years, I know I want to do this. Is it going to work the first time? And he said, so on the first take when I'm doing my work and all of a sudden I have this breakdown, I was so inside happy that it worked. So that was great. Now, of course, they want another take. Is it going to work again? Oh, my. And it worked the second time. Each time in the first two takes, when he had the moment, he sat down. He was standing looking out the window of a train moving and had the moment and sat down. By the third take, sitting down was all he needed to do. The body learned the response in a very Pavlovian manner. So it didn't take him out of the moment because he didn't need all the other concentrations. Actors get in trouble with that even much simpler ways. Actors show up on location or in film, or we start the rehearsal process. And we're working with an actor, and we're supposed to be lovers with that actor. And we, as much as I like the actor and as beautiful as the actor is, I don't have those feelings, so I use a substitution to enhance the feelings.
What's a substitution?
Creating a person to give you the inner life. In other words, let's say you and I were doing a scene and I'm playing your father in the scene. And as much as we're close, I don't feel fatherly to you. I feel, even with the disparity in age, I feel more like a close friend, more brotherly than I do paternal. So I might want to create something that's going to give me a person that's going to give me the paternal side of that. Doesn't replace you. It just gives me the paternal instinct towards, and I can take that to you. I still have to pay attention to what you're doing, who you are, and what you're saying and behaving. But that's a substitution.
Okay.
I lost my train of thought.
That actors get into trouble because they take a love scene.
Yeah, so now I have to be in love with this actor, and I'm using a substitution for it. And after a while, by day 3 or 4, I don't even realize I'm walking in and making love with the person. And all of a sudden I go, oh, wait a second, I'm not doing my substitution anymore. I think I love you. And then, of course, being actors, we act out on it, and life is nice for a while, and then the play ends or the movie wraps, and we say, oh, damn, I left my wife and my kids for you. And damn. Yeah. And then we don't even have the common sense to go, what was I thinking? We usually go, you've changed. Yeah.
I'm doing the nervous head scratch.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So there's all of that.
Why is it that there's so much? I mean, there's actual what the word is escaping me, but there are people. I mean, that have written books about this and argue in against it, that have taken on such a dramatic and angry point of view about effective memory, when it's really just something that you use as a technique in very seldom moments. But
Yeah.
Why has it? Is it because of an argument between Stella and Lee? Is it because of the whole visit to Stanislavski in Paris and coming back and Stella saying, we're not doing that anymore? Because, I mean, what is it? Is it because of that?
That may be a contributing factor. I don't know. Certainly Stella has a very loyal, deservedly loyal following. She was a gifted, not only a gifted actress, she was a gifted teacher. Interestingly, this is just something I want to include here. I don't think, except for perhaps Clurman, I don't think any of the great teachers ever stopped putting Lee and his work down. I never heard Lee put anybody down. And that spoke volumes to me. Quite the contrary. There was a moment with one of the great teachers where there was there was a letter written that really spoke very disparagingly of that teacher. And when I found the letter, there was a desk in Lee's music room that we all referred to as Clifford's desk, because it was Clifford Odette's desk that he gave to Lee, that he willed to Lee. And one day when I was up in the apartment, Lee said to me, "It's just a mess. Would you straighten that out?" And as I was straightening it out, I found this letter, and it spoke very disparagingly of this teacher. And I went to Lee with it, and I said, "My God, if you publish this, you put that part of the argument to bed." And he said, "If I publish that, we destroy that teacher, and that teacher's too valuable." So even in his own defense, he wouldn't do it. So I think that's an important point. But going back to your question, there are very few people who took the time to really study Lee's work before they put themselves forward as some kind of an expert. And unless you studied his work rather extensively, you can easily misinterpret and misunderstand some of his most important teachings. So I think that's a piece of the puzzle right there. There's one teacher. You know the teacher. I won't say.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's a teacher that you know. But there was a teacher who once said to me, David, we're saying the same thing, you and I. This student is confused between what you're saying and what I'm saying, but we're saying the same thing. I mean, after all, who studied with Lee longer than I did? And I looked at that teacher and I said, but I didn't know that you ever studied with him. And the teacher said, I've been a member of the Actors Studio for 20 years. But that's not studying with him. That's at the Actors Studio. If you wanted to study with him, you had to be in his classes, either at Carnegie Hall or, once the Institute was founded, at the Institute. That's where you studied with him. Working with him at the Actors Studio, totally different. Far less detailed experience. And yet that person is going to then say, here's what Lee Strasberg said. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I said earlier there were two exercises that we can attribute directly to Lee. Everything else are variations on Stanislavski and Vakhtangov. The second exercise is a purely training exercise, although I've had students say that they've used it in performance. I'm not quite sure of that, but the song and dance exercise.
Jack Nicholson is famous for that exercise.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And but this same teacher that I'm referring to once said to me, "You do the song and dance exercise?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I don't get that exercise." And so, I remember saying to that teacher, "Look, don't tell anybody that you don't get it. I won't tell anybody. You don't tell anybody." Why? I said, well, saying that you're teaching Strasberg's work but you don't get the song and dance exercise is a little bit like being a physicist and saying E equals MC squared. I don't get it.
But there it is.
So, so that's another piece of the puzzle. We live in a society that does not allow for personal expression at all. And so when we come to acting classes in which they teach us how to reconnect to some of the most important moments in our lives and give them voice, that's what's important to us. And we go back to a semi-therapeutic environment, sensibility. And so that's why we dwell on that. Now, let's also combine that with the fact that Lee himself was an extraordinarily passionate man. In the classroom, more than any place else, actually. He was, as I said earlier, famous for not engaging with people, not talking to people. He sat in the back of a limousine for 3 hours, coming back from Philadelphia with his 15-year-old daughter playing Anne Frank before it opened on Broadway. And they sat in the back of a limousine, and she wrote very famously, and Susie spoke about it very famously. They didn't say a word for 3 hours because outside of a classroom, he just, in those days, couldn't talk. He was very closed off that way. But in the classroom, passionate. And in that passion, alienated a lot of people. Lee was screaming at me. No, he wasn't. So the combination of repressed expression, incomplete training, having difficulty dealing with Lee's passions.
And people that are out there just misrepresenting Lee's work.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget, it's 31 years since he died. You also have a situation where people have taught in his name at his school who, because they were friends of the family, after he died, they would be hired. Oh, that person's a wonderful friend. There was one person who was hired to teach at that school. I shouldn't say this.
Okay, then don't.
Okay.
Let's just not. Yeah, let's not get into that.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah. So you've been so generous with your time, David. Thank you very, very much for this. Thank you. I'm gonna talk about one other thing. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but we're gonna talk about one other thing, and then I'm gonna circle back to put a cap on our conversation to make sure that the purpose of this talk is clear. So the other thing I want to talk about is, which is very important to me, and it was very important to me, something that I felt very passionately about, and that is the practice of outside of. So, okay, your classes are divided into two halves. There is the technical side of the half of the class, and then there's the scene work half of the class.
Correct.
Okay, so briefly, why is that the case?
You state it as the technical part of class and as the scenic part of class. I think of it differently. So did Strasberg. What you're referring to as the technical part of class is the actor working on the actor's instrument. So, many of the things we discussed tonight, what is my honest, not only honest, but real response to an imaginary person, place, environment, object, anything? What is my real, how do I deal with that? How do I work on my instrument? How do I keep it relaxed when all these different elements are coming in and influencing me? What is relaxation? I have people who study with me for longer than a year and still do not yet connect into what relaxation is. When I go back and look at my own notes from his classes, it's like I'm amazed. Did I really think that? Oh my God, I'm 2 years into training with him. 3 years into training with him, and look at this nonsensical note that I wrote. Oh my gosh, it's nothing like that. So it's a long process of learning. Doesn't mean you can't act before the process is complete. You can. It just means that your acting is going to improve and improve and improve and improve. So we're talking about what you refer to as the technical, is the actor working on the actor's instrument, keeping it focused, developing powers of concentration and willpower, relaxation, imagination, and expression. That's what that first part of class is. The second part of class is, can I use it?
Or learning how to integrate it.
Right, exactly. Learning how to use it. Here, at Purchase, in my class, I have the sophomores, so I have them for 2 semesters. In the first semester, I teach acting, and we break it down into the same kind of thing. Work on the instrument, work on scenes. And by the way, not only integrating it, there are things that can't be taught as separate exercises. How do you teach someone how to pursue an objective? How do you teach people to organically find the beats? Not sit down and say, oh, here's a beat change, and here's a beat change, and here's a beat change.
What is a beat? Sorry, I can't help myself.
A change in the pursuit of action, a change in the pursuit of objective, a change in the pursuit of response or need. Each of those things are different beats and scenes. And we can often sit down and recognize them and intellectually say, oh, this is a change right here. This is a change right here. This is a change right here. There is a way to also ignore those intellectual choices and find those beats organically. And by the way, when we find them organically, we have to find them each and every performance. We can't just say, oh, I found them in rehearsal and I'm going to impose them in all subsequent performances. I have to be able to pursue them organically each night. So you can't teach that as a separate exercise. So seeing has as need. That can't, acting. Jimmy Cagney, look him in the eye and tell him the truth. One of the greatest definitions ever. Can't teach that as an exercise. Well, maybe you can, a little bit in song and dance, and certainly Sandy Meisner's repetition exercise has elements of that. So I have to rethink that a little bit. But so those elements. But here at SUNY, I have them for 2 semesters teaching an acting class. But in the second semester, I teach Introduction to Rehearsal and Performance, in which we choose usually a full-length play. This year I did 3 one-act plays. And we spend the entire semester learning how to rehearse, how to audition, how to rehearse, and how to bring that to performance.
That's great.
It is great. But what I find is very interesting, because it's their first performance. First year, there's no performing. First semester, sophomore year, no performing. Now, they have all this knowledge that they're bringing to the intro, and they go right back to high school. Boom, everything they've learned out the window. Hi. So it's really, and that's very often the fear factor. And sometimes over the course of that semester, we help them implement their craft. Then comes opening night. Boom. An audience? Oh my God.
F it, I'm doing this other thing. Yeah.
Do it something differently? No. Oh.
So your classes are divided into those 2 halves for those reasons.
Yeah.
That you've stated. What I wanted to talk about in the scene portion of the class, and you spoke about this briefly at the beginning of our talk. In the scene portion of the class, when I'm done, or when one of your students is done with their scene, your first question is, "What do you want to tell me?"
Right.
And at the beginning of our conversation, the example that you used is, maybe the actor's so nervous that they just wanted to get through the scene and see if they could relax, right? We've defined what we mean by that, what you mean by that. Then, as you progress, many more elements are thrown in. So you get to the point of you asking, what do you want to tell me? And the list, which isn't necessarily, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, a set list, a 1 through 5 list. It can be anything, right? You can add to it whatever you were working on. Just tell me what you were working on. You add to it, well, this is the story, this is the situation, this is the objective I was trying to work, these are the sensory elements I brought to this exercise, this is why, this is the awarenesses that I had, this is the things that I thought got in the way, and then you present that list of elements that you were working on. And then based on that, you critique each element, saying, I saw this, that, and the other thing, and I saw you working on that. I suggest that you try this and that because it'll help open up your instrument. It's a great opportunity for you to reach out, to explore the... Why is it that way? Why teach scene study that way? I mean, it's a rhetorical question. I know the answer, but I guess to take the rhetoric out of it and focus it more. Do you teach it that way in order for the artist to gain to become independent as an artist and not need a teacher so much, so that they themselves become aware of all of their own tools and how to use it? Do you teach it that way so that there is a language between actors to address potential issues? Do you teach? Am I clear?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure you are. All of those things, and it's a great observation on your part. It is for all of those reasons. But even like so many other things, there's no clear answer to that. Let me give you several different points of view.
Because oftentimes I've been in other classes where you do a scene and you hear that was really good, but you should do this. And what was really good? what, what what was really good? I didn't pay $200 to have somebody tell me that was really good.
Exactly. You want to work with people who have a critical eye and learn your instrument as best as I can learn somebody else's instrument, or at least observe your instrument, and who can recognize what you were doing and help you move forward. But you also want to work with someone that you have confidence in their understanding of the world in which we live. So in the teaching of the actor and going step by step and step by step and step by step, on and on and on, we're expanding a person's skills the same way we do in learning anything else. Our greatest surgeons didn't learn by doing surgery. They're brought along after medical school, slowly, carefully learning skills. It takes time. And in that time, we're always expanding the base of knowledge. We go beyond just saying, here's what the scene is, here's what the character is, here's what the objective is, here's what I did to bring it to life. Very often, that's where we start off. But there's a very unique, wonderful thing that happens for all creative people. We bring our unique powers of observation to that. It's not just a matter of why Hamlet procrastinates. It's why do you think Hamlet procrastinates? That's your Hamlet. What are you bringing to Hamlet? What's your understanding? And so that has to evolve as well, so that when an actor after a scene is telling you, here's what I think this scene is about, not just the story, but what that story is about, you can gauge their logic and either accept it and go, I never thought of that, that's really wonderful. Or, I think you're going far afield when you do that. Now, does that make me more correct than the actor presenting it? Not necessarily. They're points of view. But often, we have to work with people who help us develop our points of view in the world. Lee Strasberg never taught a class in script interpretation. Never. And yet we all learned how to interpret scripts as our craft developed and developed and developed, so that it was part of what do you want to tell me, was interpreting the script from your point of view. And listening to this extraordinary teacher, not just extraordinary acting teacher, life teacher, talk to us about what the world in which we live and what the sensibilities of this world are. Now, Stella Adler taught a legendary script interpretation class, above and beyond her acting classes. Sold out. And everybody that I knew, oh, Stella's script interpretation class is fabulous. And so one year I tried to get into it and did. I took Stella Adler's script interpretation class. And I walked into Lee's office and I said, I'm taking Stella's script interpretation class. And he goes, why? And I said, because everybody told me it's fabulous. I want to see what's going on. Let me know. That's all he said to me, was let me know. And I took her class, and it was fabulous. I didn't learn more than what I learned in Lee's class about script interpretation. I learned it in a different manner, a different presentation, and in a much more focused way, because Lee, it took a long time to get there. For Lee, you would want to start interpreting things. Well, when you reached a point where you wanted to start interpreting things. And he would say, why don't you learn how to keep your concentration before you start interpreting anything? So it took a long time. But once you got there, I don't think that Stella had anything in content that he did not give us, but it was in a much more focused, condensed way. And I'm endlessly grateful that I took that.
So then that's why you said that there was several things about why it is that the class was formatted that way. What do you want to tell me and what that list of is? But then you said that I had an intuition, or that is it what I said about teaching an actor to be self-sufficient?
Oh yeah, well, to a large degree. Although I will tell you, you've heard this story before. You have, but for anyone who listens in on this, Lee Strasberg had a couple of mannerisms that were universally recognized. One of them was when he was angry. He made a sound of clearing his nose at the same time that he was talking. He would do that. So that as he was talking, he would go like that.
You knew you were in trouble if he was talking to you.
So that at the end of a scene, if he said to you, so what do you want to tell me? If he did something like that, it was like, I don't want to tell you anything. I just want to get out of this room. I don't know what I did, but oh my God.
Play a corpse.
That's right. Just terrible. Just terrible. And it was so universally recognized that when I became a member of the Actors Studio, and I used to do that impression of Lee, for people like Paul Newman, I would do it for Ellen Burstyn, I would do it. I mean, and they would all crack up because he was known. People who were in his classes long before I showed up on the scene, Lee. And they would just crack up when I would do that. Now we come to the first film that he ever did in his life, The Godfather Part 2, Hyman Roth. And there's that wonderful scene where he's playing with Al Pacino, ostensibly in a hotel room in Cuba, in Havana. And Michael Corleone, Al Pacino, says, did you have Mo Green killed? And Hyman Roth looks at him and goes, I did business with your father. And he never asked me anything like that. And he goes on and on with the whole thing. And the anger, the seething inside anger, not screaming, seething, but with that, was so real. And there was the marker, right? There was the marker. And so I went to the screening of Godfather Part 2, and then we all went out to dinner after a screening. I'm there with Francis Ford Coppola, Al Pacino, Lee Strasberg. We're sitting at Elaine's restaurant. That doesn't exist anymore. It was on the Upper East Side. And we're all enjoying ourselves. And Lee leans over and says, what did you think? And so I told him what I thought of his performance in different moments. And I mentioned that scene. And the anger was so great. And you did that thing that you do when you're really angry. What thing? You know, when you clear your nose while you're angry. What are you talking about? Lee, when you're angry, you do that. Really? Didn't know that he did it. And didn't even accept me telling him. And I even said to him, Lee, Paul, Ellen, they all laugh when I do my impression of you with that. Really? Yeah. Then he got angry at himself, not for doing it, because he felt that an actor, it's fine to use your own mannerisms by choice. If you choose to play that character as yourself, and you bring your mannerisms to it, that's fine. But if you're compelled, you don't even know you're doing it, that's not creative and fine, even if the whole world applauds you for it. So, as a result of that conversation, he always checked in with me. After, even as he was preparing roles, he would say, "Come, watch me work. I need an outside pair of eyes to tell me." So yeah, we develop our sensibilities, we develop a sense of ourselves, all of that. But it's always helpful to have an outside pair of eyes. There was a wonderful teacher who worked for Lee. He was one of the first people that Lee ever asked to teach. He was a dear, dear friend of mine named Ed Covins, and he was a gift. Died a few years ago, but he was a real gift. And I never did anything without Ed watching it and coming back. I trusted him. I trusted his eye. And, to find that again is a search. That's hard. They're out there. A lot of good people.
Yeah.
A lot of good people.
Well, so that's clear. So that's a great story.
Yeah.
It's completely unrelated, and this isn't as part of my list of things, but there's another great story that I heard you tell, and it doesn't fit into the flow of our conversation right now, but I just remembered it. And I don't know if you can tell it, but I'll remind you of the story through context, and that the context is that once you accept a student into class, it's that's the choice that you've made, that you keep that student and develop that talent. It's not your place to judge. And you give an example of an actor.
From Lee.
Yeah.
Well, there were a couple actually, but the biggest one was he said, "It's so funny when you accept someone into class." He said, because all the questions that we reviewed earlier tonight, the sense of the person, but sometimes there's some other undefinable something that makes you accept somebody into class. And then you keep them and you don't judge them. You work with them. And he said, I had a student who I didn't think was doing so well, but he wanted to be there. I accepted him. I kept him. And I never saw anything really exciting come from that actor. And then, but some people are so good looking that even if they're not such good actors, they're so beautiful, you want to look at them all the time. There's a place for that in this business, and you want to help them be the best actors they can be. But this person wasn't that good looking. But some people have this vibrant personality. They're exciting, and you just, you want to watch them. They're so exciting. But this person wasn't that vibrant and exciting. I don't know. They weren't good looking. They didn't do much in class. They weren't exciting. They weren't even that good looking. So who knew Dustin would have such a great career?
Yeah.
Is that the story? Yeah.
But it was also a story.
Well, there was.
But it's also a story about hard work.
Oh, Dustin?
Yeah.
Incredibly hardworking and dedicated actor.
That's right. So that goes with it.
No, absolutely. But, the same thing. When Mean Streets didn't open, it didn't even have a commercial release yet. It was at the New York Film Festival. And I saw it, and it was wonderful. And the early buzz with it was that it was really Harvey Keitel's movie, but Bob walked away with it, and Bob De Niro. And I remember the day after seeing it, I was walking down 13th Street to go get lunch with Lee. The two of us are walking down the street. And I said, I went to see Mean Streets last night at the film festival, New York Film Festival, with Harvey and Bobby. And he said, yeah, how is it? And I said, yeah, it's extraordinary, really an extraordinary movie. And he said, yeah, people say that Bobby is really great. They say he's like another Brando. And I said, well, he's really great. As far as Brando, but he's really great. And yeah, who would have thought that? Was Lee's answer at that point. He changed his mind over time, and he really loved Bob De Niro and loved Bobby's work. But that I'll never forget that. Who would have thought that?
It is. It's interesting. I guess that what the takeaway is just if this is what you love to do, make sure it's what you love to do, and then work really hard at it.
Yeah. I will tell you that one of the hardest things for me being, I love being here at Purchase. It's a good school. By the way, there are 2 acting programs here at Purchase. One is the BFA Acting Conservatory, and one is the BA Acting Major. Mm. And of course, the undergraduate acting program that is so highly regarded is the BFA Acting Conservatory. So there really are 2 different tracks. But one of the hardest things for me, because I don't believe in it, is if people don't work to a certain standard in a certain time frame, we have to cut them. You're not working up to standard at the end of first year. You're not working up to standard, I can't pass you to second year. At the end of second year, you're not working the standard, I can't pass you to third year, and they're cut from the program. And I have a real hard time with that because it goes so against the grain of what I learned from Lee, because you just don't know when something is going to click for somebody. You just don't know.
Yeah. Even you don't know. I mean, you personally, as being the person that's looking for the technique and the growth, that you don't know when it's going to happen for you. You just keep doing it.
Well, I can,
and not judge yourself or others, and continue working at it.
Somebody once went into Lee's class. I think there's so many things I've shared with you over the time I've known you. But I remember I was sitting in Lee's office. I was the director of the school at that time, and I was sitting in Lee's office with him. And somebody who had been studying with him for several years came in and said, Lee, I'm at a crossroads, and I just want your input. What do you think? About what? Me, Lee, about me. You're a fine fellow. No, Lee, as an actor, what do you think? What the hell do you care what I think? Lee Strasberg, what do you think? He says, it doesn't matter what I think because I've got no jobs to give out or to deny you. I'm a teacher. Not only that, there's only one person in the whole world whose thought about that should be important to you, and that's you yourself. As long as you continue to believe in what you're doing, you will continue to do it regardless of what anybody else says. And the moment you stop believing, it's time for you to find something else to do with your life.
That's sound advice. So I want to circle back.
Okay.
To sort of cap the conversation.
Okay.
And what I wanted to once again thank you so very much, and
thank you,
and thank you very much to SUNY Purchase for hosting us and allowing us to be here this evening. Really fantastic installations, and congratulations on your continued success.
Yeah, thank you. Can I give you a plug at the same time and all your people?
Well, I'm not done, but
okay,
we got no plugs. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear and in how I consider the ultimate goal of this work, right? And the ultimate goal of this work, it's a technique, it's a craft, like any other craft. It's something that you learn because you want to achieve something, and so you learn, you acquire skills and tools in order to be a better craftsperson at achieving whatever it is that you set out. In this case, we're talking about acting. And that everything that we've talked about this evening, and some things that we just don't have the time to get into because there's lots more to talk about, there really is, are simply pathways toward self-realization as an artist, or tools to develop a language, a creative language within this milieu, within this discipline, right?
All right.
But ultimately, the studying the method or any other technique is really just how to access your own creativity in a collaborative art form.
Absolutely.
That's the end game.
Absolutely.
And if this method works for you, fine. If another method works for you, fine. If no method works for you and you can be consistent, fine. If any combination, fine. It's just about what works for you.
Well, that goes back to never two the same. The job of any good teacher in acting, I can't talk about other things, but in acting, is helping the actor find out who they are and how to access that and use that consistently. And if that's Strasberg's work, and sense memory and song and dance and private moments and effective memories and all the rest of it, if that's what that is, great. If it's Stella Adler, if it's Bobby Lewis, if it's Sandy, it doesn't matter. It's who is speaking to you, who's making sense to you. There's a very nice actor, Ed Norton,
Yeah.
who was in my class for a while and did well. But it stopped speaking to him and he went someplace else. And he feels very strongly that the other teacher that he went to really gave him the access to his own instrument that he didn't find anywhere else. Well, I don't know what you think about his acting. I like his acting when I see it up on the screen.
Very much.
And if he got that through this other teacher, I mean, that's fabulous. You like whether it's teaching or acting or directing, anything in our craft, check your ego at the door. Can't let the ego get in the way. So yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, if wherever you find the person who's making sense to you, who's helping you do that, achieve who you are on stage, that's the teacher for you.
And hopefully who will help you be self-sufficient.
Absolutely. Yeah. As self-sufficient as any of us can be in a collaborative art.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know about you, but I love it when I get wardrobe on,
Are you doing a substitution right now?
Huh?
Are you doing a substitution right now? You're
No,
looking
no,
at
no.
me weird.
No. No, it's just that I do love you, Andrea.
Oh, God. All right. It's time for the plug. What was the plug?
The plug was that you said that you were thanking me for being here, but I really think that what you guys are doing with my TV is really special and important, and so I'm happy to be here.
Oh, right on, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Guys, sorry that this evening's transmission didn't come out to you live. We had problems with live stream, and we'll take it up with them to figure out what it is with their technology that didn't agree with us this evening. But nonetheless, thanks so much for watching this particular industry interview. And with us once again is David Gideon, who is a teacher, an acting teacher here at SUNY Purchase in New York, but he also has his own ongoing acting class in New York City. And you can reach him at davidgideon.com. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And hopefully we can do this again, David, because it's an ongoing conversation. It's such a pleasure to have.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'd love to come back.
Right on.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.